Okay, let's turn, Ray, now, please. Thank you. In case you can't tell, the picture came up the way it was supposed to. It's focused on the what's up front meat. That's the Jordan in the background, okay? So that's Jordan River, and that is what we're going to be looking at. Now, I'm saying Jordan River, I'll probably mispronounce this, Qasr El Yahud. That's what we're looking at. And that's because this is a specific place. Laylee, can you do something for me real quick? Can you help me? Come on. Come on. Hurry, hurry, hurry. I want you to take this and show everybody. Right here is Jericho, and that's the spot. So this is the Jordan. And you walk around and show them Jericho and the Jordan right there, okay? Show everybody. Go ahead. Okay, so what she's going to show you is where the Jordan, where this, and again, I'm mispronouncing it, Qasr El Yahud. This is the place where a lot of things are believed to have happened. So let me ask you, when we think about the Jordan, before we get there, let me just go through this real quick. This looks like somewhat of a fertile plain, but you're going to notice all up in here is this barren mountain area. And there are some fertile things. That area is scary in a sense. What you just passed, and I think I've got these off. So let's go back here. It is off. Okay, that sign you just passed is one of the checkpoints. If you look on that map that Laylee is walking around, Laylee, do it a little bit more, you're going to see all around Israel, you're going to see white. And then that area is a yellowish color on that map where Jericho is. That's because that's the West Bank. The West Bank is a whole different breed of animal. That is where when Trump went over and he was reporting back to us, that's when Trump said walls work. And that's exactly, thank you. That is exactly what he was talking about. There are about 176 checkpoints, if I got my numbers right, to get in or out of the West Bank. They're really serious about this. When we went into Bethlehem, it is a military zone. Now, I felt very safe. There was no issues with that. You got soldiers everywhere. It's kind of humorous. They have different areas or different labels. West Bank, again, it's messed up. You've got, if anything is section A, and oh, by the way, we weren't supposed to take pictures. They get really irate, especially the Palestinians. If you're taking their picture at these checkpoints, it's a big deal. I think Israelis did too, because they'll target them. And so it's serious. But section A's, where it's Palestinian controlled and Palestinian police. Section B, I'm heading somewhere with this, and this is the way it is. They share control, Palestinians, Israelis, but it's Israeli police. Section C, Israelis are controlled, and there's your Israeli police. All of this is within the West Bank. It's just all kind of, West Bank is split up, and then it's split up even more. You would think the next section, it would be labeled what? You would, but it's labeled E1, and I don't know why it's labeled E1. But that's just for all the connecting roads and things like that. That's most of what we were on, is all these connections. But as you drove through, you would see these sections, and this is nothing to do with it there. So you see the different, I don't know what, I know the Israeli one, but look out through here. Look how densely, I mean, this is just desert. And if you look, they're seriously, you're not getting through here. And if you do, you're going to get hurt. They'll see you. There's minefields we pass. It is a serious business there. It matters to them, but that's what the area is like. There's how desert it is. And this is the Jordan. This is the area, the Jordan Valley. This is where the Jordan is. So I wanted you to get this, this picture. And part of the reason is, the map that Laley was walking around for us, you saw going from the Sea of Galilee, Jordan River to the Dead Sea. It doesn't make it anymore. It's too low. The water levels and all are too low to make it down to the Dead Sea, which is part of why the Dead Sea is drying up and going away so bad. But this is what, for me, this was an eye opener. This is the kind of area partially that the children of Israel would have come through. When they got to the Jordan, now we're going to see the Jordan, and I want you to, and let me see if we're almost there. Okay, let me just get through this. This is more the area where we're getting ready to park, and I took these pictures just because you can see this. My first thought was Muslim, but you'll notice the cross up here. You'll notice this. That's a Jerusalem cross. It's a cross with 4 crosses, and we'll get to those later on when we get to Jerusalem. So this was most likely a Catholic area. This is when we got down here. Now I'm going to go more pictures, but notice, I mean, here's your people. I'm right here. I could almost take a big run. I can jump halfway across. So it's not that big. So you're thinking, when you look at this, you got to think to yourself, okay, what's the big deal? There's the baptismal areas right here. That's the Jordan side. This is the West Bank side. We just came from where we saw the flag. That was Israeli. And everything's close. Everything's little. But what's the big deal about walking across this thing with your armies to go over to Jericho? Jericho's right here. That's why we're covering, hopefully. We may not. What's the big deal about crossing this thing?
Was it a lot bigger then?
Be more specific. I'll say yes.
Wider?
It would have been wider. Let's turn in our Bibles. Turn to would overthrow its banks. Joshua 3. Go ahead and read for me verses 15 to 17.
And so who bore the ark came to the Jordan, and the feet of the priests who bore at the ark dipped in the edge of the water, so the Jordan overflows all its banks during the whole time of harvest. That the waters which came down from upstream stood still and rose in a heap very far away at Adam, the city that is beside Zeratan. So the waters that went down into the sea of Arabah, the sea salt failed and were cut off, and the people crossed over opposite Jericho.
Okay, here's what's happening then. This thing, in that time, it overflows its banks. You remember seeing all the desert area, how out and flat it was? You just imagine it overflowing. What came to my head is if you're going 231 north, that river overflows, that whole area looks like a lake and it's a field. And you don't want to walk through that field because there's current there. And it's nasty. That's exactly what would have been happening here. So just think about how big this would have been, and that's the place. Now, people have debated, and they say, well, how do we know that right here is that place? We got to look at a few things. Number one, and I'll say this is a big one, tradition. Okay, that's where it's gotten passed down over centuries. This is the place. This is the place. And tradition has said some stuff. But you've also got areas around it where there are cliffs. You're not going to take 600,000 fighting men and jump them down a cliff when you can walk half a mile down and cross where it's flat. So the location looks right. When they crossed over, where were they going to? They're heading to Jericho. And on the map that Laley was walking around, you've got right there was this one section and Jericho. So it had to be somewhere around here. Is that the exact? Who knows? But this is really close to where it's going to be. So that's the importance of this section. And we'll see that there's more here. It's not just the crossing of the children of Israel. What else happened at the Jordan that we know of? Old Testament right now. What's something else that would have happened?
Stacked them 12 stones down in Jordan.
That would have been at the same time. That's absolutely right. So they took stones out of here, took them over to the other side, and they made a memorial. Absolutely. What's something that happened at a little bit different time? Okay. How did you know that? Listen, go ahead and read. We'll take them out of order. So 2 Kings 5, you know what? There's a lot there. Summarize 2 Kings 5 for me.
Okay, so David has leprosy. Servant girl tells him about a prophet in Israel to heal him. He goes first to the king, right? The king's kind of upset. He goes to Elisha. Anyways, so he's upset that Elisha tells him to go and wash in the Jordan River.
Okay.
Complains that it's a dirty, a filthy river. Would rather go somewhere where it's cleaner.
And this is why I brought this home. You can see this. It's filthy. As soon as people, and you'll see, I think a baptism, why don't you keep shaking this up? By the way, Tom, you mentioned the rocks. Now, I don't know why, but the whole time I was walking around here, probably because people like me were picking up rocks, that's about all I could find for a rock from the Jordan River. So you got a rock from the Jordan River, take that and let everybody see it, okay? One at a time. So this is your Jordan River. And this is where Naaman, and you can see, it's 40 miles roughly for him to get back home and get to where there is a river that's like pulling out one of our bottles of water, as opposed to this thing, which is trash. This is ugly, ugly water. And so you can see why he would be saying, you gotta be out of your mind. I can go to a clean river. Well, they convinced him to do it, and did the water cleanse him? That's a loaded question. Huh? God cleansed him. It wasn't this filth that did anything. I'm encouraged by that. Think about what that, I mean, God can take filth, sinful people, and use them even. And he used this dirty water. He did the work. But these are, oh, and by the way, I want to just, I'll say a public thank you. I don't know what happened to my picture. Some of them are gone, and I've lost something. These came, my friend up in Ohio emailed these down to me. And so these are from some of his stuff. Again, this is Jordanian side. And there were probably 5 or 6 of these little roped off areas. They have a little bit of cement, and you'd see people start going under. Because once they got off the cement, it's very, little bit, it's not treacherous. You can swim in it, no current. But that is it. Let me see. Okay, this is Chris's. He took this panoramic view so you can get the whole thing in. It's not curved. That's just from the panorama. So, but that's the, again, you're looking at the Jordanian side. So here's what happened. That's the side that the children of Israel were on. And they came this way across to get the Jericho. We're on the Jericho side. So for what that's worth, just to give you a bearing. Thank you, sir. Everybody see it?
Well, is that very deep right there?
I would say when people were getting baptized, they got up to about right here. And as soon as they stepped off, it went to here. So I'm guessing midway, you'll be over your head, but it's not much, not much. But the levels are so low that it won't get to where it needs to go to get down to the Dead Sea. So things are rough with that right now.
Did you say anything about the Palestinian people? Are they really belonging to Jordan? Or whatever Jordan called their people? Ain't that part of it?
There's Jordanians and Palestinians.
Yeah, ain't the Palestinians, the Jordan, belong over there?
Well, they would say no, that they belong in Jerusalem.
Well, I know they
That's
say
the
no.
fight.
I didn't know that was the truth.
That their view would be they belong, Israel should be kicked out. That's their view. And they belong in Jerusalem, in that area. I took this the picture of this. This is one of the ones you didn't mention. You remember, this is where Elijah, now who had, Pam, it was you, 2 Kings 2, read verse 4, 6, and 8.
Now therefore, thus says the Lord, thou shalt not come down from that bed on which thou art gone, but shalt surely die. And Elijah departed. You did say 2 Kings, right?
Yeah, 2 Kings 2.
I thought it was 1 Kings.
I've got 2 Kings 2 in mind, Elijah.
Did I give you the wrong one?
Well, I thought you told me First Kings too.
Uh-uh.
I'm not
Second.
reading, I'm reading Second Kings.
Oh, good. 2 Kings 2,
Okay, 4.
that should be Elijah.
Wait a minute. I'm on the wrong, I'm in first, sorry. And Elijah said to him, Elisha, tarry here, I pray thee, for the Lord hath sent me to Jericho, and he said, as the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. So they came to Jericho.
Okay, before you read 6, he's on, if you remember, the Jordanian side. God has sent me to Jericho. He sent me to, I got to cross over to get to Jericho. Okay, go ahead.
And Elijah said unto him, tarry, I pray thee here, for the Lord hath sent me to Jordan. And he said, as the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. And they two went on.
Okay, so this is the other place that this is the other thing that happened here. Now, one that we're going to cover a little bit more later on, there's one other main event that happened at the Jordan, and he did a lot of it at the Jordan. Who was it? John the Baptist. This is the spot. Because think about this. And I had, when they were teaching this, and I'm going to do a video for you in just a second from Fote. But when Jesus was baptized, it was there at Jericho. This was the spot. And then he went up, as soon as he was baptized, he went up to the mountain to be tempted. The Holy Spirit led him to be tempted. And we'll see that as well. So this gives you an idea. It was easier for me to take a picture of something than to try to take notes and remember everything. So this is Fote, and you'll have to listen close, okay?
More than one story. That's the place where the Israelites, led by a man, his name is Joshua, the son of Nun, brought the Israelites all the way from Canaan. This is the place where also Elijah took his fiery chariot and he went all the way up to heaven just from here. This is the place where Naaman the Syrian he was killed. This is the place where the Lord Jesus Naaman the Syrian. Oh, Naaman. Yes.
Naaman the
This is the
Syrian.
place where the Lord Jesus Christ. This is the place where Jesus Christ is was found. Keep in mind that Jesus in Hebrew is going to be Yeshua, which is in English Joshua. But there's a big difference between Old Testament Joshua and New Testament Joshua. When Old Testament Joshua, he came all the way here, he opened the gates of the promised land. But when our Old Testament came here, he opened the gates of the Philippines. And the difference between Old Testament and New Testament. Keep in mind that this is the place when the Israelites lived their miserable life, right? And it came all the way to the people. And the same place where that miserable life was ended from him, this is the place where the ministry of the Lord started. And from here, the new era of the New Testament started. That's why today you are going to die, and you're going to be buried, and you're going to be resurrected in the Lord. And that's what we will serve after baptism. After baptism, as indigenous Christians, we will serve the fry dough. When you bring the dough and you throw it in the pan full of oil, this dough will sink, then it will rise up. And this is his baptism, is dying and rising up. And they will put in top of it honey, because we believe that baptism will be sweet like honey. And this is here what we will serve after baptism every single time. When you go all the way down here, I want you just to count 5 steps. So who would like to start counting 5 steps? It's not 5 steps.
Okay. Hard to understand. I get it. I want to. There was one part that I thought was a really good. It was a neat idea. If you could hear him, could you hear him talking about the bread, the dough? Did you hear that part? He's talking about baptisms. And what they do is a tradition they have over there is when they have a baptism, they'll have a pot, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about soon. They'll have a pot of oil, hot oil, and they drop bread dough into it. And the bread dough will sink, and that's the picture of going under. And as it cooks, it rises back up. So there's your buried with him, raised to walk in newness of life. They take it and they just drizzle it with honey and the sweet stuff, and they all have a feast with these things. And it's because of the sweetness of life that we've entered into. That's the picture. We got to do this. Basically, let's have donuts every time we have baptismal service. It was great.
I heard him say too, that was interesting, he talked about, this is the place where Jesus was the new Joshua, the Old Testament Joshua, right? They were both at the site of Joshua conquering the land, and then the new Joshua in the Jordan River.
It was an excellent picture. I had not thought of it that way before. He did a really good job bringing that out. The other one he mentioned was, and I mentioned this is where, when you had read about Elisha going across, this is the spot where, okay, so you had Joshua come, God separates the sea. Elijah comes, smacks the water, separate the sea, the river. Elijah did it. Then Elijah, he mentioned at that spot, Elijah was taken up. Now, that may not mean, sometimes you read an account like that and it's almost like, okay, this is a Bible story. It's not a Bible story. It's a Bible account of something that actually happened. Elijah at this place was taken up and didn't see death, and his mantle came. Elisha took that mantle, went back and did the same thing and crossed again. This is the place that it happened. And it did happen. And that was an encouragement just to think of that. These are events that are historical events that occurred, and the world will say, no, you're living in a fairy tale land. No, I'm living in something that actually happened.
Tell them ask them about the calendar, what it's built around.
Yeah, absolutely.
So was your guy Fote, was he messianic?
Yes,
He was.
yes. And he was very, I'll say he is more Christian than Messianic Jew. I mean, he would make comments on the bus like, I am so thankful that I am a Christian because I love bacon. And he has trouble finding bacon in Jerusalem. And you're going to. And that's one of those, and this is a whole separate issue, but that's one of those things where in our culture, okay, bacon's not a big deal. It really isn't, except that we love it. It's a big deal that way. But over there, that is one of those disputable issues where you have to be willing to say, okay, I want to reach all of these neighbors of mine. Am I willing to defer eating my bacon? Is it really worth it in order not to offend my neighbors? Here, it's not an issue. There are other issues we have, but there it's a reality. Okay, let's see.
You want me to read verse 8?
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
And Elijah took his mantle and wrapped it together, and smote the waters that they were divided hither and thither, so that they went over them on dry ground.
And verse 11.
And it came to pass, as they still went on and talked, and that behold, they appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire, and parted them both asunder. And Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. So
this is the spot. Now, can I say that place right there? No, this is close. And it's neat to see the reality of what had happened in these scriptural accounts and see where it occurred. And it makes sense. There we go. Okay. I showed this, I think, to the girls. This is like an intermediary step between the river and going to Jericho. This is a big deal there. Okay, this is one of the restaurants that Fote love to go to, but and I'll tell you this. The name of this, I can't tell you the Arabic name. The name of it is Upside Down. So what they do is they cook. And again, I apologize. I turned my phone and it did this, and you're just going to have to tilt your head and pretend, but you'll see the pan. That's what they cook it in. And then they serve it by going boom. And when they pull it up, you've got that. It's like a cake of rice with spices. It's good, but it's not. Yes, but nowhere near the consistency. So you just flip it and it's got rice and spices. That's all this really is. And then they have chicken cooked beside it. And just go through it first. So here. Okay, that's how, and that's the noise level in there too. The restaurants are loud. I'm pretty sure this is the restaurant where up on the back wall, it had a picture of Yasser Arafat, and you were in the West Bank. And different heroes, whatever you want to call it, but that's where we were. I took that, I don't remember who this is, it's not me, but just notice the size of it. Look at your own hand. And then right here, that's the size of those bananas. I took the picture because those were the best tasting bananas I've ever had in my life. It was like taking a big one and crushing it down into something smaller, but all the flavor compacted. They were the best bananas I've ever had. And that's, huh?
That tablecloth is part one of Yasser Arafat's head.
The red?
Same kind of, he had different ones, but that's one.
Here's, yeah, this was very similar to his. And-
He wore that too. in
Yeah.
pictures. He was- had that red and white.
He is a very popular person in the West Bank. So these were one of my favorites. I ate like 3 of these one day for lunch, and that was it. And they were just delicious. So
Did you gain weight?
Baklava.
not at all. It is 100+ degrees. You're walking constantly, and I ate a lot, and it was awesome. I loved every second. They had a different name, but it is the baklava, and it was good. And let me
Going back to the fruit, because it's a hot, dry climate, all their fruit is a lot sweeter and richer tasting.
It is. And so when you hear, speaking of that, when you hear in the scripture that they were going into a land that was flowing milk and honey, milk we get, okay, their livestock were very productive, they had whatever milk they needed, but what's the honey? It's not bees. More specific. Huh? Dates. It's the date syrup, the date honey. That was their big thing. And what do you think's drizzled all over? I mean, it's everywhere because those date palm trees just produce it really, really good. So that's the, and that gives you, I say that to say, okay, when you look in scripture, this is what it's talking about. They just had dates all over, and Ray's point with the sweetness of it, it is amazing how much sweeter, and I mean, it's just good. So yeah, it was wonderful. At some point, I'm gonna get,
very hardworking.
okay. This is going into Jericho. I've still got halfway to go, and it's time.
Go ahead.
We good? Okay. All right, going into Jericho. Jericho was probably one of the dirtiest cities that in my opinion, that we entered. There is Old Jericho, which is tiny, very tiny. And then there's New Jericho, which is a spread out city, very modern. And it's just like going, if we go into Indy, you can go into certain areas and they're trashy slums, and you can go into nice areas within the city. We came through getting close to the old city, and it was like this. And you do have people just trying to make a living, trying to do whatever they can. This is kind of the outskirts. We had some of the, I'll call them the nicer apartment buildings. And I would not, I mean, not where I would want to live. These people live for Americans. And they want Americans to stop. They want you to go into their store and buy their stuff. That's how they make their living. So COVID killed this whole area. They had no tourism. And that's, I think, their fourth, Ray, do you remember, 4th, 5th industry main industry is tourism. I don't remember if it's third, fourth, fifth, somewhere in there. Diamonds are number one, and they don't have any diamonds in their country. They bring them in and cut them. So that's their main industry. They love Americans. So there's just a little bit more, again, it's not a pretty place. Call to prayer going on. So that's one of the pictures. That's what all of this is. The loudspeakers with the call to prayer. And it's almost not spooky, but it's an eerie sound when they do their call to prayer for the Muslims. Very eerie. Okay, I'm going to take exception with some of this. I'm going to take exception with something I said. You will hear me on one of these saying this, and I was quoting, this tower that we're going to look at is dated at 8,000 years old. They're saying here 10,000 years old. Well, if we believe, which I do, in a young earth, and we take a biblical account, we're 10 is like way on the outside. We're more like 6. 2,000 now, 2,000 back, 2,000 to creation. You're looking more like 6,000. So I differ with the dates, but it's not worth the argument. So I would say we're more like 6,000, 7,000 year old earth as opposed to a 10,000. The 1,300 feet, lowest place on earth. I'm not sure why they say that, because lowest place on earth is Dead Sea. Maybe this is the lowest city, but there's some towns around Dead Sea too. So again, I'm not sure where all this is coming from, but this is what their claim is. Lowest place on the face of the earth, oldest city. It's also called the City of Palms, which is the dates. And there's a lot of dates there. And for whatever reason, I don't know, they flourish in that dry climate. They just flourish. And Israelis are brilliant. They have, remember we talked earlier about their water is very limited. So what they'll do is they'll take the water and they'll desalinate it. They'll take dirty water and make it kind of clean. But they have, okay, this water is drinkable. This water is for irrigation. This water is for the palms. They can put salt water around those palm trees and it just intensifies somehow. It pulls in the salt and puts out the sweet. And how that works, don't ask me, and I may have said it wrong, so don't quote me, but they have the sweetest fruits you have ever tried. So that's at Jericho. Now, this is where this is a tourist thing, but this is, okay, Elijah, that's not tourist. Elijah made the water what? Sweet. The water's still sweet. The water's still good. He healed. God used him to heal that water, and the water's still good. And so they recognize it, that, you know, they have the fountain here just to commemorate, if you will. Elisha did a great job at serving God, and God used him to heal that water. Okay. Oh, you can drink, well, out of that I wouldn't. That was going to be that's probably kind of gross. But the water that's coming from that spring, yes, you can drink. So we've got some things that happened in Jericho. For sake of time, I gave you some passages. Those who have those passages can tell me what is something, the first thing we know that happened at Jericho. Kids, what happened at Jericho? Huh? The walls fell down, absolutely. Absolutely. And they fell down because the army came and hit them with battering rams, right? No? Well, how'd they fall down? What did the people have to do? Yes. Yes. Okay. They had to march 6 days, and the 7th day, 7 times, it came. God did it. And we'll see that in a second too. So there's one thing that happened. We just saw another thing that happened. What was that one? Right there. Made the water clean. So Elisha is there. Who had the Luke 18 passage? What happened there? This is one that's not as, these next two aren't as prevalent. 18, I'm sorry, 35 and following.
And it came to pass that as he was come nigh to Jericho, a certain blind man sat by the wayside begging. hearing the multitude pass by, he asked what it meant. They told him that Jesus of Nazareth passed by. Cried, saying, Jesus, thou son of David, have mercy on us. They which went before rebuked him that he should hold his peace, but he cried so much the more, thou son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus stood and commanded him to be brought unto him, and when he was come near, he asked him, saying, what wilt thou that I shall do unto thee? He said, Lord, that I may receive my sight.
Exactly.
And Jesus said to him, receive thy sight, thy faith is saved.
So here at that account, Jesus healed this blind man. Now, this is interesting. Think with me where we're at right now. Luke 18, near the end of the book. Where is Jesus heading at this point? He's heading up to the cross, isn't he? So he just stops. He heals the blind man here. The next chapter, chapter 19. Now, I didn't know. Okay, this didn't click with me. For some reason, I had it in my head, this account. Look at who had chapter 19, verse 1. Okay, just summarize it for me. What is that story about?
It's about the tithes.
Zacchaeus.
Zacchaeus,
Yes.
and him admitting that everything that he took from people he was giving back,
Right.
what do you say, fourfold?
Yes. And he did that because he was converted. Now, what do we know, kids? Kids, what do we know about Zacchaeus? He was a what? Zacchaeus. Oh, you're thinking Zacharias. That's a good one. You're thinking of another guy though. Like, I'll start the song and you tell me what you finish it. Zacchaeus was a kids.
That's one of the first songs I learned.
Zacchaeus is a little guy, and Zacchaeus, kids, he climbed. How did he want to see Jesus? What did he do to see? He climbed up in a sycamore tree. Okay, there's a sycamore tree. No, that's not the one. Okay, they estimate that one's only like 800-900 years old. Okay, so it's not the one. Now, later on, we're going to see pictures of trees that were there when Jesus was there. Those are awesome. And just think that those olive trees, they were there when he would have seen those. It's a neat thing. But this is for tourism. That's all it is. Stop, get a picture, stop and buy something. That's their whole thing. But that is where, and I didn't realize this. I didn't realize when we were discussing it that Zacchaeus, the account with Zacchaeus was so close to the cross. I had in my head, I wasn't thinking of Jericho either. I was thinking like Galilee and then Zacchaeus at near the beginning. Zacchaeus is just before the cross, and Zacchaeus was at Jericho. And I didn't realize either of those.
Did they by chance, was Zacchaeus, when he passed away, did you go to any cemeteries?
Oh, I went to a lot of cemeteries.
I mean, as far as for Zacchaeus, did they show?
No,
I didn't know.
no, nothing like that. He wasn't, what's the word? Memorialized or anything like that. They didn't have anything on him. But they have this set up just as a tourist thing, but it does give you an idea. That's what the little guy would have crawled up so he could see Jesus. When he came through that area, that's when he would have seen the Lord. He would have climbed up in something like this to see Jesus. Okay, we're told that when Jesus, we're going back a little bit now, at the Jordan, when Jesus was baptized, the Holy Spirit did what? Came down on him like a dove, and then what did the Holy Spirit lead Jesus to do? Drove him into the wilderness. He went up to a mount to be tempted, the mount of temptation, and that's what they believe this section was. Now up there, you remember, no, you haven't seen it yet. Masada. Herod built one of his fortresses on top of Masada because he's scared to death of the Jews who hated him so much. He also built a fortress down here in Jericho. That is one of Herod's fortresses. Now it's a monastery and Catholic stuff. But so they've taken all that over, but that is where they believe to be the Mount of Temptation. I think I'm going to say more coming up in just a minute. This is where they've excavated. Okay, back up. This is old Jericho. So when you say old, that's just the little it's the tell, it's the mound where the original city was, and then they built all around it. And I had a video I was going to show you. I don't know if I can get to it still, but it was an aerial shot that I could not get. And they had some areas that I couldn't go in that they could. So I wanted you to see those from somebody else. This was a Canaanite burial area for a prince that they uncovered in Jericho. That would have been older than Abraham. And it's just, it was really out there. And this is, I'm not gonna, for sake of time, this is, if you want to see it later, I can show you. This is the tomb area that I just showed you. Okay, this is the tower they uncovered. They're not sure exactly what it is. Right here, you'll see there's a hole in the top. It's like a cistern. It's empty. So they don't know if it was a grave. They don't know if it was just like for grain. They have no idea, but they didn't find any walls attached to it. So it'd be like a corner tower. They didn't find anything like that. But what's interesting, and you'll see it in a second, and I'll try to pause it, the way it's a way of excavating these things. They made a trough, a big area to walk through to get to it. And the reason they did that is, if you look here, you can see the different layers of civilizations that have happened. So they would cut them out like that to get to where they were going, hoping to show what they had found. Well, one of the things they found in one of these layers was a lot of charred things. And that would go perfectly in line with the Israelites came in, destroyed the city, and burned it. The whole city burned. And one of the layers is charred remains. And that was an interesting one. And that's just another view. I was trying to get, whoops.
This is the tower that they found 8,000 years old in the city of Jericho. This gives you a frame of reference for how deep it was buried. See something to the side.
There's the trench. So that's the trench they had dug there. That shows you a little bit how deep it was. And I'm sorry about the wind. It's just heavy all the time.
The monastery and stuff down it, but they consider that to be the mountain that takes in.
Sorry about the fingers. The fingers are free. Okay, now this was an interesting point. That's the stuff up at the top. As you come down to the base wall, this is what they've uncovered. And basically what it would be is this would be, and I'm just forgetting my words all of a sudden. I have it written down. Yeah, retaining walls. So they would have a retaining wall, and then on top of a retaining wall, you would have usually red brick. And they found, if you look here, that area right there, they have found a bunch of red bricks that fell out from the wall. So, and what would happen, what the theory would be then is that these walls, this is probably a good 10 feet. And then they would have these red bricks going up more. So it'd be like a 25-foot wall that you're not going to get over. But when they came out, it just made a perfect sea drain to go right up into the city. And you'll see outer and inner. So you got two separate walls where the red bricks came out and made sea tracks for them to go straight into. So it was I enjoyed seeing this part and seeing some of those bricks at that same level. For me, it was a really good picture. Okay, I'm going to hit one more here. I think I've only got one left. What was interesting to me is, okay, so we're at Jericho. Just another shot of that. Okay, this is not Jericho. This is a picture we've already seen. Do you remember this one? Valley of the Shadow of Death. And so this was where they have that St. George's whatever. It's a Greek Orthodox thing, but you remember this. There's that road that goes all the way from down there at Jericho. And this is where Jesus, right after that happened, he would have walked this road heading up to Jerusalem to die for you and me. And this is where we're at in history. And so that, for me, this was a good finish up to Jericho because he's leaving Jericho and heading up. Now, I've gotten out of order a little bit with that because now I'm at his death. Everything we've covered pretty much has been Old Testament. Soon, next, we're going to be heading into New Testament. We'll go to Bethlehem. We'll go to Nazareth. We'll see areas like this. But for me, this is a good finish up for Jericho. He's about to take this, what I consider an arduous walk to get up to where he's going to die for us. Now, let me very quickly, come on, where am I? There I am. See if I can pull this up for us. Okay. And I wanted, on this thing, I wanted to show you about 6 minutes worth, because it does a lot better than I could do. So this
scholars, and I'll maybe use that term a little. So here is the opening as we look down into.
I could not get here. That's the inside of that tower we were looking at.
Some suggest that it was perhaps a fortification tower. However, there doesn't seem to be any walls on either side attached to it. So perhaps we'll have to be content with not really knowing what it was.
This is that trench I was telling you about.
So as we walk back out of this trench,
Hey, I got the right word.
it was a method of archaeology introduced in the 50s primarily, because when you make a trench like this, you can see exposed the different layers on both sides of this trench, and just around the bend, we can still see remnants of a burn level. This corresponds, of course, to this Joshua 6 story that we'll talk about, and how the city was not only captured, but burned. You can still see remnants of charcoal. And then also some remnants of some mud brick. Mud bricks were placed on top of the stone wall that you'll see in a short moment as we circle to the southern end of the site. The use of mud bricks was common in the days of the Bronze Age. But our main interest is to see the walls at the southern end. And here are the retaining walls, the stone retaining walls that Joshua would have seen. Now there's a debate whether these walls should be dated to the time prior to Joshua, in what we call the Middle Bronze period, or whether they correspond to the conquest of the nation in the 15th century, or in the beginning of the Late Bronze period. It was a double wall. You can see one on the outside and one further on the inside. And yet we see the top of this retaining wall now, and know that according to the story, the walls came tumbling down. Question is, what wall was it? It's most likely the mud brick wall that once stood on top of this stone retaining wall. We'll see a good example of a mud brick wall that predates this stone wall, at least according to a few archaeologists. And here it is right in view. Take this mud brick wall that dates to the Middle Bronze period and place that type of wall on top of the stone wall. So take this wall and try to imagine that type of wall being on top of the stone wall, making the entire height of the wall in the days of Joshua at least 25 feet high. And yet on the seventh day, the Israelites circled the city, and it was the mud brick wall placed on top of the stone wall that came from. The city was conquered and destroyed and burned. In fact, archaeologists have discovered many evidences of the burn level and the complete destruction of the city.
Those things are heading up to that fortress. No, we left. So that that's all of them. Okay, so for me, that shows us a lot as far as Jericho. To think back that those walls that we just looked at, that we got to touch and feel, those are the walls that Jericho, the children of Israel marched around those walls. Those are the walls who lived on the wall. Rahab. Somehow, they don't know how they had the houses or whatever in there, but they were right. And you can see why that would be a less desirable place to live, because you're right there where the enemy can get to you first. And that's hers was spared. How? I don't know. But they had that retaining wall, and then that it was neat to be able to see how all of that happened. It was good. So that's all I've got. Questions, comments? Right? Any inputs?
Let me defend the Jordan River a little bit.
Do it.
The closer you get to the Sea of Galilee, the cleaner the water is.
Absolutely.
You know, when we were traveling back up home,
Yes, it was.
when we were traveling back out there to Oklahoma, the water out there was so red, like. I told Jim, I said, I wouldn't know what to go that. You know, it's worse. That's worse.
Yes. Okay, so any other question, comments? Thank you, buddy. All right.
Did they found the Dead Sea Scrolls as well?
They have found, yes, they have Dead Sea Scrolls, and right now that's coming. They have them in a museum, and don't judge me. They don't like people going around there, click in the Dead Sea Museum. So if you want to take pictures, you have to carry your camera, and I don't know how I know this, but you have to carry your camera like this and just kind of walk around and click and keep it low and not make a show. But there are multiple pictures that are on my phone from the Dead Sea Museum, and you get to see some of those later on, but it's, we're not supposed to, they don't want a lot of the flashes happening at these things, and that's what they stay away from. But it's, yes, they have those, and they have a, what do you call it, the scroll, a fake one that's really huge, like the size, bigger than a table like this, with the scroll sticking up the top, and they've got the Dead Sea Scrolls wrapped around it, so you can see them, and they're there from ancient.
Deuteronomy?
What do you mean?
That was the Dead Sea Scrolls, that was.
Dead Sea Scrolls are pretty much your whole Old Testament. They may have been missing a little bits, but Dead Sea Scrolls, we're going to get to see that area too, where they went to the area at the Qumran and they found them where the cave was. You'll see a picture of the cave that you cannot go to now, but no, you can go to it. We couldn't go to it, but I think you can get down to it still. But it's all there, and it is really exciting to watch. Okay. Well, thank you for coming and putting up with me, trying to remember everything. And next time, if I'm remembering right, we will probably be doing Bethlehem and possibly Nazareth at the same time. We'll see how far we can get.